So there's an emerging arms race regarding AI weaponry and AI tech, um, involving a lot of tech companies and billionaires and governments. So can you describe the mindset behind this arms race and what ideologies and goals are driving it?
Sure. And granted, there is a lot of stuff, but I'll try to summarize very briefly. I think right now, very generally, we can say that there is an arms race in the light of the fact it could go both ways. In the light of the fact that there's war right now in Ukraine that's been going on long term, and as of October, there's proliferating conflict in the Middle East generally that I fear. We don't know, but both of these conflicts, the Ukraine conflict is already long term. uh, what's going on in the Middle East right now seems that it very much could become long term, or that it could escalate into a regional or even world conflict, in my opinion. We've also seen some recent developments on like the Korean Peninsula that have been quite concerning, as well as in Taiwan. So we're seeing a general tendency towards conflict, right? So, in hand with this general drive towards conflict, exactly, we're seeing kind of a new proliferation of weapon. I would use the word arms race to describe what's going on. Perhaps an AI arms race, let's say, even though it's not only AI. What's especially dangerous is, of course, as these conflicts have proliferated, I think AI in general has become a buzz phenomenon in the last couple years, especially with like Chat GPT. And what's happened, this is maybe not the best way to put it, but it's amazing to me to see how quickly we went from this public gag of haha, I write to Chat GPT, have it suggest jokes to me, to, large language models being incorporated into AI powered weapon systems and programs that can, allow for lethal targeting. They can allow for the operation of autonomous drones that could be lethal. And this is a situation where we're seeing a lot of this technology that's often AI powered. Ukraine is being used as a major test bed for this, as I've discussed in this Unlimited Hangout article from October. And essentially, they're testing this technology to see what can be done, what can be improved. And it's happening very rapidly without really ethical constraints or concerns, because you're in a wartime crisis scenario. Perhaps the ethical debates that would have had happened beforehand, I'm not even sure they really would have happened in a meaningful way beforehand. It's very hard to have them now when a lot of people are like, oh no, Ukraine has to win at all costs. Let's allow it to play with these dangerous weapons technologies. Granted, it's not only Ukraine, but we're now that we're already in a time of war, we're seeing states hire defense contractors, either standard regular defense contractors or like venture capital based defense companies, which we can get into. We're seeing them being given the cash to develop these technologies at a pace that stands no real questioning from anybody who cares about human rights or the general population. That to me is the question of what's going on. In short, I think what we're also seeing right now is that what's going on in Ukraine is already proliferating elsewhere. I did write a little bit about this, but even in Palestine right now, Israel has like this AI powered weapon. It's a targeting system, let's say, called the gospel. And my understanding of the gospel is that it allows for Israel's the IDF to identify targets for military military targets much faster than standard human intelligence. So AI powered technology essentially has allowed Israel to bomb and target Gaza in record time. As of shoot, this is an old stat, but I think as of like December 15th, they had already targeted Gaza like over 22,000 times. I don't know what the number is now, but the point is we've already moved to an arrangement where, mass testing of AI is going on. It's made a very public debut with stuff like Chat GPT, but of course, not only Chat GPT. And in record time, we're already seeing AI powered systems being used to synthesize data, to target, and then kill. So that's the race in short.
You mentioned potential human rights violations and civil liberty violations. Just talking about this system that you just mentioned, I think of like a rudimentary sort of, like you said, Chat GPT AI thing that we have access to that makes mistakes all the time. Like I'll ask it what today's date is and it might get it wrong just because it's still kind of early technology. How does that translate over into the military side as well, and the fact that you know because of Israel's indiscriminate bombing and its willingness to just use all means necessary in Gaza, that it's potentially using or testing these weapons that may have errors or something, but at this point it doesn't really matter to them because of this commitment to just bombing it so
Mhm.
thoroughly.
Yeah, yeah, I had looked a little bit into this when writing the Unlimited Hangout article. I think, as you said, exactly, a lot of this AI technology, even if the people pushing the technology act like it's super accurate, that's not necessarily the case. I know a specific concern about some. Shoot, I don't remember the specific accusation, but some AI systems in general are prone to what is called hallucination, where the AI, like whether it's a large language model, LLM, something else, it's saying something that's not true is true, and it's acting like it's true. And because it's a AI powered machine, it doesn't necessarily know to be able to correct itself. And so it's hard not to believe that a lot of these AI powered projects that are ongoing in wartime, my opinion is yes, they are relying upon AI systems that are often faulty. My understanding a lot of like facial recognition software, for example, is also like racist a lot of the time. Like I think with people of color, it often gets like basic information wrong. So not only is it wrong, it's also racist. But anyways, um, the situation is that yeah, I don't necessarily think the tech is even that precise. I'm not saying that it can't do a lot of things or that it doesn't have the potential to do very advanced things, but the software operates quickly. We know it has errors. So when you apply the hallucinations, often being wrong, etc., to what's going on in Gaza right now. Okay, I don't think the IDF cares about being precise, even though they say, you know, Israeli Israeli officials are like, oh, AI helps us be more precise, so we save civilians. We know they're lying. That's not true. We know that they want to destroy Gaza. But the problem is, yeah, exactly. They're also just using technology that is often possibly wrong. So you're taking imprecise tech to influence major military decisions. That's obviously unethical, but it's also allowing for, let's say, warfare that's very impersonal and very far removed from perhaps how humans would conduct warfare. And of course, I'm not convinced people conduct warfare in ways that are ethical, but now you're just moving this on to a system that has to do things very quickly. It often targets in mass. And so it allows for a situation that, in my opinion, is a runaway train.
So, if you could get into who are the main actors driving the AI arms race, and you've already gone into it a little bit, but how this AI weaponry is being used in Ukraine and Gaza, and I think it's pretty interesting the mindset behind some of this stuff. Like you quote Alex Karp, the CEO. Is that his name, Alex Karp?
Yeah. A Palantir, yeah.
The Palantir CEO, and his like takeaway from the movie Oppenheimer. The end was he was basically his takeaway, I guess, from the movie was, yes, that is awesome. We need to do what they did in this movie, which is kind of crazy.
Yes.
But yeah, if you could get into that and kind of like why this is such an important race, I guess, from the perspective of these guys, how they kind of think that I forget what they say, but they kind of make this point of like inaction is like the worst thing that we could possibly do in this because then we're going to be left behind and beat by our enemies.
Yeah. Well, there's a number of different moving parts to this, unfortunately. So I can give you what I've observed generally on this, my reporting on this topic. Now, of course, when it comes to like this AI arms race, if you want to call it that, we can call it that. I'm not sure what to call it. I think that's definitely part of what's going on, but there is, generally speaking, a new defense industry boom. And I think that's happening partially due to venture capital. And I've also done some reporting on venture capital's impact on war policy in the United States, for example, where venture capitalists like Peter Thiel and Eric Schmidt are simultaneous, and many others, but people like Thiel and Schmidt are simultaneously funding defense startups in mass through venture capital while also influencing policymaking processes. So they kind of have their influence in both areas simultaneously. I think that we're seeing venture capitalists like them do this, who maybe they don't have necessarily traditional influence. They're not traditional politicians, but somebody like Peter Thiel, who long-term venture capitalist, is he just is swimming in money all the time. I think he's interested in influencing the direction of tech generally. He's interested in influencing defense generally. As I said before, I functionally treat tech and defense as one and the same. More complicated than that, but I think we can say roughly that they have such a strong relationship that we need to treat it that way. Um, I think that some of this push is, of course, about standard. If you don't do this, if you don't take this money, if you don't fund these companies to do our bidding, you're going to lose out in these wars and conflicts to come. And as we had discussed earlier, I think unfortunately conflict is going to become more commonplace. As we had said earlier, conflict's proliferating in Ukraine, it's proliferating in the Middle East. I don't know what will happen with Taiwan and the Korean Peninsula, but as I had said earlier, this is also becoming a hot spot in terms of further tensions and further possible conflict. So we're seeing an arrangement where people with a lot of money actually are influencing the proliferation of these weapon systems as well, because they're interested in how war will pan out. But I think they're also interested in developing these technologies that can be used again across sectors. I think that whatever is introduced during the Ukraine conflict, surveillance wise, um, very much could be introduced outside of wartime too. So I think this is a multi-pronged phenomenon where people are in it for the money. There's the idea that if you don't buy into this arms race and that if you don't support the defense sector, you're going to lose. And so now you have bigger concerns because your country is now on the losing end of things. But I also think that the people that are funding this stuff need to be examined in due course. I don't think that venture capital, for example, is getting enough attention at this point in time. I hope to do more reporting on it because I don't think it's necessarily just about the money. Venture capitalists are, of course, trying to get high returns from the companies they invest in, But I also think enough of them are the super wealthy types that are literally interested in driving the course of society, generally speaking. That's a very short answer. I hope I didn't say something too convoluted. I'm happy to clarify. I think what's difficult is it's all very interconnected the more you look into it. So when I look at tech, I'm like, that's just the defense sector. So it makes these answers a little bit more complex.
Yeah, and I watched some of the YouTube videos that are in your article, showcasing some of this technology, like in an advertising sort of format. It has like this cool
Mm.
music behind it. It
Oh,
feels like a Call
yeah.
of Duty commercial or something. Yeah, and I was I don't, maybe it's my own projection, I guess, but I was expecting to see the comments kind of skeptical of all of this stuff, but everyone in the comments on the YouTube video was like, "Wow, this is so great! I'm so happy that we're doing this." Um, and I think that maybe part of that is because the way that it's being portrayed in these advertisements is the way that we're talking about it. Like, oh, like we need to do this because we need to
Mhm.
unleash this, wrath upon our enemies. And if we don't, they'll do it to us, right? So I think that people get kind of riled up in this tribal way from that
Mhm.
mindset. But I think that they're maybe failing to see the potential for it to be implemented domestically, some of this
Yeah.
technology. So if you could get into why you think it might be implemented domestically and any past precedent that technology like this has been implemented domestically. Like I know Palantir uses predictive crime uh, policing and things like that. So if you could get into that.
Yeah. Yeah, and also I've noticed the YouTube comments are always like that, which is always kind of scary. I think that it's they're almost trying to push a new worldview of like a new gilded age of militarism, which I find bizarre. But yeah, I think what's very dangerous about this technology is that it is dangerous on the battlefield, but I think it's quite clear that what's developed on the battlefield will or could appear in public, day-to-day life and vice versa. I think maybe a good example to talk about is Clearview AI, for example, which I covered in the Ukraine article, which again is backed by Peter Thiel. I think he was their like first major funder. But Clearview AI is essentially a facial recognition service, and it was actually, it's still used by US law enforcement, but Clear UAI was banned for most of the private sector, is my understanding, due to just the ethical concerns about mass collecting people's pictures of people's faces, and it's often been just like straight from websites and especially social media. So it was banned in the United States, mostly not by law enforcement, but mostly by a lot of it. And Clearview AI, and I think this kind of shows what I mean. Clearview AI is a little bit down on its luck as a result of this. So Clearview AI literally reached out to Ukraine's Ministry of Digital Transformation to say, "Hey, would you all like to use our facial recognition service during wartime? We're going to give it to you for free." And so Ukraine obviously says, "Yeah, we're down." And Ukraine theoretically has used the service to like identify quote unquote Russian spies passing through the border. It's used to identify the deceased. I guess it's used quote unquote to combat misinformation. That's what they say. So it's used for a number of reasons during the Ukrainian war by Ukraine. Ukraine, like Clear UAI, even got a pretty nice couple news segments on, like, I want to say CNN. Like it got some nice news segments to kind of brag, "Hey, look, our service is being used in Ukraine. See, we're actually good people." So it was kind of able to use this wartime moment to advocate for itself in this way, so that maybe if it's used again in the public sphere, in day-to-day life, people won't question it so much. And my understanding is the founder of Clearview AI, when asked about the ethical ramifications, he said, "Oh, January 6th was when a lot of people actually became more positive about Clearview AI because Clearview AI helped identify people that participated in it," or something like this. So essentially, we're seeing a service that was used more in public life but got essentially booted in a lot of ways. be able to use a wartime scenario to normalize itself again. And so for me, I don't know what will happen to Clearview AI per se, but I wouldn't be surprised if it shows up again, not through just law enforcement and just standard everyday life, as facial recognition unfortunately becomes something more commonplace. In terms of other AI powered software, I suppose I can get into a little bit about what I've observed in terms of what's being done in Ukraine. But a lot of the services that we're seeing proliferate in wartime Ukraine, and it's a little difficult to appreciate what this means. I feel like I've researched Palantir forever, and I feel like it's hard to appreciate what it is that they do. But their claim essentially is a company, by the way, they're almost definitely a CIA front. Like, let's just be level for a minute. But um their claim to like what they do is that they say they're very good at collecting and synthesizing mass amounts of data so that you, their client, can use the synthesized data and whatever that may mean to quickly make decisions, right? And I suppose as journalists, we can kind of appreciate that a little bit because it takes a very long time to research and then be like, here, I've synthesized this information that you, the reader, can maybe get something from. But their point is that they want to develop systems for data collection and synthesis that help you make decisions in wartime. This technology, oh, I don't remember what some of their stuff is called, but a lot of it's stuff like targeting. So Palantir's, I think it's called artificial intelligence for, I have it written down. AIP is what it is called. That's what it stands for. But they have an AI program that's specifically for defense, where again, we see something like a large language model that was. It's similar to ChatGPT a little bit. If you watch some of their demos, it's not unlike ChatGPT in the sense that a bot is essentially telling you, hello, here's what we found about this target that we've identified. How would you like to proceed? And then you, the operator, it calls you an operator, which I think is hilarious. You, the operator, then have selections as to what you can tell this program to do. You complete, or you say, you tell it what to do. I think it's a little bit simplistic, which is also dangerous, but you can essentially follow the prompts that it provides you to execute military targeting that can be lethal. So this is something where we've seen, again, I'm not trying to say it's exactly like ChatGPT, but I'm saying that we're seeing large language models that have likely had a lot of training from the private sector day-to-day life. I mean, we're teaching ChatGPT more about us every day. These systems are being perfected in by in day-to-day life that can now be used in wartime. So basically what I'm saying is that it goes both ways. We can understand that AI that we see in our day-to-day lives probably helps the military complete its objectives in a number of ways that are maybe difficult to appreciate, but the difference, I think, could become night and day very quickly. That's kind of it in short, but I'm sure there are many more examples. I think some of the other stuff that creeps me out is just like, what is it called? Like Google Home. I don't have this. I mean, just like the fact that a lot of people have normalized that you have this thing at your house that you're like, I'm going to ask Alexa questions and it's going to help me out. It's very clearly a system that could help people in wartime execute military actions much more quickly and much more impersonably. And perhaps when we're talking about drone warfare, which I can kind of talk, I think I can talk about drone warfare, that's then happening on a mass scale where the drones are what's doing the killing and it's become completely removed from human decision making, or mostly removed.
Just to follow up really fast, what did you mean exactly about the Alexas and those kind of technologies helping out in wartime? Do you mean through like collecting data on where people are located and things like that, or?
Yeah, I'm forced to speculate because I don't have a specific example, but what I'm simply saying is that I have a hard time believing that no one on the battlefront has considered, hey, how can we spy on people to use information in this way? I think a lot of this is about data collecting, and a private device in your home listening to you 24/7 and being able to answer you when needed. I have a hard time believing that this technology is not somehow being used in wartime. But I would say that specific example is me speculating a little bit. But I'm simply saying mass surveillance helps in the war effort generally, because if you can collect a lot of data about your enemy and if you can synthesize data very quickly, you have the ability to hopefully, for you, move quicker than your enemy.
Got it.
So the way that the military industrial complex has sort of kept its power and has maintained this kind of influence over politicians and politics in general is this kind of perpetual war, perpetual enemy or fear. During the Cold War, it was Soviet nukes, right? The ability to start a nuclear war and end the world in that sense, and it transitioned into the war on terror during the early 2000s and still today, to an extent where there's this sort of ambiguous lifeless enemy that just exists, an evil sort of force in the world that has no real shape and that exists in different um, sort of capacities. Do you feel like AI and whatever else these companies are developing will be that next sort of uh, I guess, enemy, or just kind of something to use to fearmonger, to get people to get behind, more military spending, and to continue this kind of perpetual existence of the military industrial complex, and how you just mentioned maybe drones, for instance. I've on Twitter, I see all the time viral clips of from the battlefield in Ukraine of these kamikaze drones being used that are super scary because it's like they come out of nowhere and they move so fast and they can cause major damage. And yeah, all the other kind of technology that you were talking about too. I think also in your article you mentioned the Boston Dynamic robot dog, for
Yeah.
instance, and other and that's also made its way into domestic use, because I believe the NYPD has their own one here in New York. I've been to a few Palestinian protests, and every single one, there's always a drone overhead of the crowd. So
Yeah, these are complicated topics because I wouldn't say that I'm inherently against AI. I don't necessarily have it out for AI. I think that people should be very mindful about how they use AI technologies. I will say that I don't use Chat GPT. I try to avoid stuff like this in writing generally, just because I don't think, well, first of all, I don't want to help train ChatGPT, but also because I think it's very important as writers that we think critically and we think for ourselves. And I think that maybe it's healthy for us to say, like, maybe there are good things that these technologies can be used for if they are used and adopted by the right people. So I'm not necessarily trying to be a Luddite about all of this. Granted, every time I see like a video of like is the dog's name Spot, like the robot dog Spot, I'm just like, that needs to stop. Like, I hate it. So I don't know. I hate it. I'm so mad that they do this. But so I don't want to make it sound like I'm inherently against these technologies, but I do think even how AI could be treated in terms of like decision making is a little bit scary to me. For example, I don't know, Whitney's talked about this, for example, but I think that a lot of people are like, oh, AI was able to deduce this thing, therefore AI's decisions about topics can be trusted more than humans. So maybe then AI can kind of be treated as like a neutral party in terms of how certain decisions are made. um what is a good example in general? Like, maybe like this AI bot is counting COVID cases. The AI bot decided this many COVID cases were existing, therefore you need to do this. I made that up, but my point is that I think there is a concern that AI is treated more objective than humanity. And I do think that that's a general concern, because if it is treated as more objective or more trustworthy than humanity, I think there are dangerous possible policy implications for that if that becomes a widespread belief. But yeah, I don't know. I think, I guess it's good for us to have healthy concerns about this. Maybe we don't need to completely say down with AI. We don't necessarily need to say down with all these new proliferating technologies. But at the same time, I think we have to be quite clear. They are already being used for very, very evil purposes. I, when I think about what's going on in Ukraine, it's like, it's amazing. We really have no real oversight of what's going on. It's very much a situation where where VC has funded a lot of these companies that are essentially wreaking havoc in Ukraine while also developing technologies however they would like them. And it's exactly as you said, in terms of how this will come back in our day to day lives, it seems to be something that we have little control over. I don't necessarily know what all of my prospects are in terms of what we should do about it. I obviously think that we need to research and report on what is going on so that people understand, who is driving this AI war, let's say, or yeah, arms race. Who is driving this? How can we prevent them from doing that? That's a good question. How do we defang them from power? I suppose important things we can discuss is it possible to divest from certain technologies? Is it possible to put policy limits on what types of technologies are being developed? Not that I necessarily have faith in the policy sector in this respect, but these are conversations that we need to have now, because they're moving at like the speed of light at this stuff. And it's literally what I was saying earlier. The fact that like AI powered targeting is already being used to kill essentially indiscriminately in Gaza tells us, unfortunately, I shouldn't say the critical moment for conversation has been bypassed. We need to just have it anyways. But things are happening so quickly and at a time of crisis that it's difficult to be able to say, whoa, 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 stop that. Unfortunately, powers that are fighting don't want to stop it for a number of reasons.
Yeah, and I could see like a potential argument in favor of AI warfare being used. Like I think that guy that I think he's the head of Enduro, Lucky Palmer
Mhm.
Lucky, is that his name?
Yeah.
From what I recall in your article, he said something about like one day there's like autonomy is important because one day we're gonna have like some crazy amount of robots fighting some other crazy amount of robots. Um, and there, like, I could see some people thinking, like, well, because one of the arguments that I think for AI that I find kind of convincing in certain contexts is that like now, for example, maybe people won't need to do these like mundane tasks
Sure.
that they don't enjoy, and they can focus on things like creating art or hanging out with people. Like maybe they don't have to clean their toilets anymore or something like that, right?
Mhm.
That's a kind of a convincing argument for AI, and I could see the same argument being applied for warfare. Like, oh, look, now war is actually much less deadly because now we just have like this country's robots fighting this country's robots for the most part. So now casualties are reduced or something like that. Human lives aren't lost as much. So like, what is your response to an argument like that as to why like AI warfare is still something to be concerned about and should probably be avoided? I'm guessing would be your opinion.
First of all, yes, that is my opinion. In my opinion, at least the current time, it should be avoided. But it's a good point that you say it, and that's kind of part of why I was saying earlier. I'm not necessarily against AI as like a concept, because I agree. Like theoretically in a society where things were not completely like hitting the fan right now, theoretically AI could make a lot of things about our lives just materially easier. There seems to be exactly like literally having AI powered technology clean something, for example. Like it could make our lives more convenient and better in certain ways. And it's exactly what you're saying. A lot of people that are pushing AI warfare are essentially saying something like, if my robots or if my drones are fighting this other person's drones, then we've saved a lot of human lives. I'm, I guess, on just this is kind of just my opinion, is that I'm not even, if somebody told me that, I'm not even sure I would buy it, under the sense that, like, okay, if the only thing getting impacted by this war is drones, then people don't necessarily feel it so much. There's not actually a risk to the society's resources. Therefore, war will continue for a while. So perhaps I already kind of think it's a weak argument in terms of just like how war works, but that's my opinion. But in terms of just
Like
like,
there's not enough skin in the game in a way
yeah,
because there's
yeah,
just robots.
yeah, I personally just do, like, regardless of my actual like research on this topic, I would just find it unconvincing, in the sense that I just think that you would have like longer term robots fighting each other, which, by the way, would be probably great for a lot of companies like Anduril, because that means that the government buys more drones for them to make. So for them, it doesn't really matter. They're going to make money. They're going to be probably pretty happy about this. But I think in general, my overall argument is that this is clearly a runaway train at the moment. If you continue with AI warfare in a way that is not discussed with the public, or it is not controlled somehow, or even at all, my honest opinion is I would prefer not to see it at all. But okay, that's clearly not going to happen anytime soon. Is that there is clearly no real room for conversation as to the ethics as to what this technology will do. I don't remember this, but I think a recent poll of like AI researchers like resulted in like 16% of them saying, yeah, AI is going to lead to certain mass death of the population. I mean, the reality is we're talking about the ability, not maybe not right now, but in the eventual future, if we're literally talking, if I remember correctly, Palmer Luckey's quote was about billions of robots fighting. He used the word billions. Who knows if he misspoke, but they're talking about, very, very large, I guess they're talking about a potential for very, very large amounts of drone warfare or other types of AI powered warfare that seem to have no real way to stop. I think that you could maybe say, yeah, this human will not push the hit nukes button unless something gets really, really bad. But, I don't think that these I don't know for sure, but I don't think that these AI systems will hesitate in ways that humans would, to say, they don't think like humans. So I'm trying to put this in like a robotic way, but I think that's it. They're acting in robotic ways. I think that they're going to make much less human decisions than we would in wartime. I think that this is a way of making warfare too impersonal, and it causes, in my opinion, it creates the prospects for mass destruction that could happen very, very, very quickly. And as we had said earlier, in my opinion, this is already what's happening in Gaza. We have Israel, a state that I believe Israel is literally a genocidal state. Israel has its hands on technocracy, on technology, well, maybe technocracy, we'll see, but on technology that allows it to say, this is a literally genocidal actor using AI to advance its means perhaps much more quickly than it would have been able to otherwise. And my understanding is that Israel is not doing very well in terms of its like ground game in Palestine, or in Gaza specifically. So if they can't really win the ground game where soldiers are invading, they can just use these AI powered systems. And I mean, Israel has a lot of money in general because the United States has moved for so many decades in the West generally to give it money and to give it the prospects to develop. I don't know necessarily about the gospel in particular, but it has had the ability to develop such sophisticated weapon systems due to its relationship with the United States, which of course has a ridiculous military budget that is being egged on by characters like venture capitalists who are essentially, and just standard defense contractors, let's be honest, who are essentially saying we need to continue forever war. or we need to continue investing in these weapon systems, or else the enemy's going to get us, in their quest to make money, but also in these other circumstances, perhaps their quest for political power. So unfortunately, it's a very crooked arrangement we're talking about, where I think that people pushing for AI warfare, I understand the points that they make, but what they have to understand is that they, by trusting in AI warfare or saying we want AI warfare as opposed to human warfare, well, I want to work on peace first of all. But in addition to that, you're essentially giving the reins over to a lot of bad actors who are in it for money and power and worse, and bad policy. I think a lot of them want forever war.
I wanted to kind of ask you a sort of philosophical question, which you've kind of already touched on, but I just think it's funny or interesting, I guess, that in AI warfare, it's like you're kind of dehumanizing war. And I think war is already dehumanizing because you kind of like treat your enemy as your enemy, right? That's why there's so many war crimes that I think occurs, because people get in this mindset of you have to not see your enemy as a human, but as like something to defeat. And then now when you add in this AI aspect, it's like you're almost dehumanizing also yourself in the decision making process. It's like you're outsourcing like a crucial part of the war, which is like the decision to where to bomb and who to bomb, and how you decide who to bomb someone, or any other kind of means of fighting, to this machine. And like, I mean, what do you? I mean, you've kind of touched on it, but what might that entail? And like, will wars become lower stakes and thus more often and fought and more longly fought? And like, I guess you're kind of already seeing this with Israel. Will like the death and destruction of humans? Where do you like? Who do you hold accountable at that point? If everyone's using AI warfare, is it like legally and just morally? I guess like what do you think that's going to do? It just seems to muddy the waters so much that I can't really like put my finger on it, but something about it just
Yeah.
feels very wrong and dystopian.
Yeah, it's kind of there's a lot of moving parts, and it's some of it's difficult. It's difficult to know. I obviously I've done some reporting in recent months about the future of defense and defense right now, obviously, and it seems difficult to understand what war. Obviously, I war and how it's being fought. It's changing literally right now, but even though I researched this, it's still hard for me to appreciate what that will mean in the eventual future. And I suppose that's partially because warfare is still like, okay, my state did this state has been invaded, or this state disagrees. Now we're fighting, and so some of it still, even though the technology is changing, some of it still seems a little bit difficult, just because, well, I don't have any real faith in a lot of these bodies, but theoretically speaking, a lot of the processes regarding like how war is initiated, how diplomacy operates during wartime, how you close warfare, etc., it's still theoretically being manned by humans. Not that I necessarily would say that that's like great. I mean, I think if you study the wars of the 20th century, we can say that diplomacy or efforts to talk things out before conflicts occurred has not often been successful, though there have been diplomatic successes. I don't know, complicated subject, because that AI, we're now talking about it within a war context. I don't know necessarily how it will affect our regular lives also. I mean, it's literally what I was saying about earlier, is like, if AI is being trusted to make decisions about wartime, will it be trusted to make decisions about day-to-day life? I don't know. This is a little bit too theoretical, but it's what I was saying earlier. If people trust AI as more objective, I wonder if that will get applied in terms of like just general society. Like, we're going to have court, and could AI be an entity trusted to decide what should be done? And is that seen as more of an objective thing? This is complicated and more theoretical, but
Hmm.
I definitely fear that humanity, or whatever it means to be human, which is just a larger question. I don't know if I can answer that, but I do feel that our human senses and what is human to us is being stripped from war, just as it's being stripped from everything else. And I think that's like, I don't know if this is the best way to put it, but I think that goes a little bit in hand with what the fourth industrial revolution is in general. It is about, I think, to me, it's about humanity losing itself while the machine becomes more dominant in society. I think that it's been discussed as like an emergent, a fusion of like the human. I would have to like the biological, the technological spheres, or something like this. So it's kind of weirdly going into an argument or a discussion about that a little bit. But totally, I do think that as this technology of war becomes more AI powered and more difficult to predict because of this, I feel that humans are being left out. Not that they were ever being included in war, anyways, but it is really scary. I wish I knew. It's hard to see what I think the future will hold. I think it's important for us to stay. I try very hard to be optimistic, and I think it's actually critical that we do stay optimistic despite whatever is going on in the world, because I think if we educate ourselves, if we, teach others whatever we know, it's important that we work to get together to get through this type of thing. And to me, a lot of people that are pushing these technologies and, I don't know, bad policies generally, and I guess that gets more into the CBDC conversation than anything. Look, I think they know that they are in the wrong. I don't know if there is fundamental evil, but I think that they are doing the evil thing if there is an evil thing. And I think that a lot of them are cowards. So to be honest, if we are honest about this, if we try to move forward as much as we can, if we say this is not human, you have to stop this, maybe we won't be successful in the very long term, but I think we'll know we did the right thing. And I also think that they will be on the losing side. I don't know. That's a little bit more philosophical, really, but I try to be optimistic despite what I see going on in war, but also in our day to day lives with just um, processes that I find dehumanizing. And I think that's just generally true. Like, I think that in modern society generally, this is too general, I don't want to sound like a boomer. I'm fine with sounding like a boomer for a minute, but it's like, well, if we think about our relationships with others, like, I don't remember who published this, but like the amount of time we spend with each other as people has decreased significantly over the last 10 years. Obviously that's proliferated with something like COVID. So I think that there's a general trend towards um, isolation that is not only about machines, but it's also facilitated by modern technologies. Perhaps it's a tool about it. And I'm not saying ban technology, I'm saying that we have to be mindful about what effects it has on people and relationships between people in and outside of war.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And like about the kind of processes in day to day life that speak to that fourth industrial revolution philosophy um, that you laid out. It's interesting as someone my age seeing like everyone that I know is on social media basically,
Yeah,
and it's like you note how the time that people spend together has decreased, and I think that the time that we spend looking at other people that we don't know and like looking at this kind of packaged versions of their lives is like increased a lot. And I think it really
yeah,
affects the way that people live, influence their day to day lives, and the technology sort of like I mean, this kind of gets into another aspect of it, but like the transhumanist sort of movement of like altering the way that you look and also the way that your body functions through um, surgeries and tech is, I don't know. I find it interesting that like the like when you go on Instagram or something like that, like everything all the famous people that you see on there have, or not all of them, but a lot of them have some kind of like plastic surgery or altering of their physical appearance, whether it be like literally like in the physical world or it be through editing photo apps and filters and stuff like that. And not to, if anyone has, I'm not saying that like that people, I'm not judging anyone that has plastic surgery or anything like that, but I just think it's interesting how at the same time that all this is happening, we're being taught that like the way that you kind of um, become accepted or worth something is through changing who you are, like fundamentally. And I think that that's kind of also an underlying philosophy of the fourth industrial revolution, and kind of speaks to the AI warfare thing of like outsourcing all this responsibility to some kind of machine, you know.
Mm.
But unless you had anything to say, I think that's a good place to end it. Stavroula, thank you so much for being here. And just if you want to have any last words, go ahead. And also, if you want to let people know where they can follow you on social media, where they can read your work and tease anything that you have coming up that people might want to read.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you both so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. In terms of where you can find me, I'm on Twitter/X, whatever it's called. I think my handle is just Stavroula Pabst. I do have a Substack, so if you're interested in keeping up with my work, that's probably one of the best places to find me, because I tend to link whatever reports I have coming out there, whatever I promote certain things, and then maybe I provide some of my own analysis of events, or I like to write newsletters where maybe I point out developments in geopolitics, or especially the intersection of tech and geopolitics that I find significant. And I will get the URL for that. It's just stavroulapabst.substack.com. In terms of like investigations coming out, I'm currently like dying because of my dissertation, so I don't have anything like immediately in the works. But I will say that I'm really hoping in the coming months, I'm hoping to do a lot more research on cryptocurrencies and the future of finance in general. So that's something to keep in touch with my work for. But as probably this interview suggests, I'm also very interested in venture capital, and not just in the area of like, I am very interested in venture capital's impact on war, but I'm also kind of interested in venture capital's impact on politics and the future generally, because I do think enough of these people, believe it or not, have enough money that they can just fund whatever projects they'd like to their tailoring and their favoring. And the impact of this on society, whether it be warfare, whether it be science, you name it, they probably are considering it, and they've probably invested hundreds of millions in whatever area you may be concerned about. So that's what I'm hoping to do over the next few months. So I appreciate it if you'd follow my cute little Substack. Thank you.